So nice to see a full house. Good morning, and from the entire India by the Bay team, welcome to all of you, and thank you for supporting us. This is our 8th year, and we have 8 wonderful events lined up in the next 8 days. We are so happy to be back on ground, happy to be in person, and I'm going to put my glasses on. So many familiar faces, so many new faces. So I hope you're going to have, the new faces coming back year after year. 2015, was it 2015 when we first started? We never imagined we'd be here 8 years later, and we actually wouldn't have been if it hadn't been for the most amazing sponsors, supporters, friends. I can see so many of you here. Age of Society, is Alice here? She isn't here. Our hosts who've so generously hosted us year after year. Mrs. Shroff, who's not here. She is our foundation, our pillar. The consulate, they are not here. But in sort of whatever, they have supported us from day one. The Caravel Group, there's Russian Society, there's so many of you here. My husband, there's a whole bunch of people, and I cannot really say enough thanks to all of you. It is so important to have festivals like this in a city like this, in our gorgeous city. And, it's a platform for cultural communication, for engaging with everyone else. It's just a wonderful way to engage with the community. And we are so lucky to be able to have done that, with the support of everyone else. So yes, and today we have Francesca and Radhika. Thank you so much for being here. So just before I call them on stage, I want to tell you that we have 2 very special events this year. We have a Wellness Day, which we have curated for Hong Kong, given what everyone's been through. It is tomorrow. So if anyone wants to come, there's a lineup of absolutely amazing events. You will be able to get more information on our website. As you exit, please don't leave your flyers. We're going to count and we know who's sitting where, so take your flyers with you. So please attend. And we also have something that is very special and dear to our heart, directed by Sanjoy Roy, who's somewhere around. It is called The Bollywood Love Story. It is a Broadway-style musical. It's at Situ Center next Saturday, so we hope to see a lot of you there. Tickets available, selling out fast, but available. So with no further ado, I'm going to invite Sanjoy, who's a friend, a colleague, a producer of many festivals, and I'm going to allow him to introduce our wonderful guests and take over. And for all of you, thank you so much for being here and for being a part of India by the Bay. Thank you. Sanjoy? After Devi.
Good morning, and it's always wonderful to be back in Hong Kong. Yesterday, when I landed at some unearthly hour in the morning, half awake, and I took the train, I was looking across the bay and I realized that there's so much more built-up area now in Hong Kong and how much we had missed being here for 4 years. So welcome back to India by the Bay. And we're delighted, absolutely. And I'm delighted to have with us 2 wonderful people. I remember the first time I encountered the Cartier book was I got an email from Francesca about 4 years ago or 3 years ago, I can't remember when. And she said, I've done this book, and what do you think? And, can we talk about it? And I said, absolutely, come on over. Not realizing how important this book is in terms of not just for the luxury aspect of what we all know Cartier to stand for, but really the history and how families work and how businesses can expand in a particular way. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Francesca Briquel Cartier, the great granddaughter and a descendant of the Cartier family. And in India, as many of you know, one of the Cartier brothers had come out to India. There were 3 brothers. They divided up the world, and we'll have a little conversation about that. And they came to India not quite knowing what they would find. And when they arrived, they saw all of these enormous gemstones and jewels, etc. And they realized that this is where their business was to be. And we have with us a wonderful lady from the erstwhile Baroda royal family, the Gaikwad royal family, Radhika Raje Gaikwad. The palace that Radhika and her husband Sam and their kids now inhabit is seen to be the largest palace in the world which is still inhabited, and we'll show you a few photographs of that. Welcome, Francesca. Welcome, Radhika. It's absolutely wonderful to have you both here in Hong Kong. But before we start, maybe we can show the 30-second film on the Cartier, which you'll have to play from your laptop.
Sure, I will try that now.
And if you can turn the lights down for a second.
Hopefully we have volume. Oh, let's go back. Is there volume?
And sound.
Okay, 1 minute. Oh, sorry, the sound's not working. Do we have some?
Audio?
Sorry, it's 1 minute. I think the sound's not working, but should we just... Sorry, guys. Slight technical hitch. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be.
Should we try it again? No, I think you've just turned it off there. That's it. No? Should we not have... Should we just do it without sound? Or we can have it at the end if we can...
Give it a shot.
Don't worry. Should we do it at the end? Should we go on to the next slide?
Let's just play it.
Okay.
Francesca, let me start from the beginning. This was a book that really you stumbled upon, and like all happy accidents, it arrived in many ways literally in your lap. You went exploring. You had to go and retrieve a bottle of red wine from a cellar.
Yeah, well, it was actually a bottle of champagne. There we are. So this is my grandfather. He was Jean-Jacques Cartier. He was the last of the family to manage and run a branch of the firm. So he ran the London branch until the 1970s, when he retired and it was sold out of the family. And then he retired to the south of France, and I was lucky enough to spend all my summer holidays growing up there. And Grandpa was amazing, man, in many ways, but just so kind and so generous, and he'd rather give presents than receive them on his birthday. And on his 90th birthday, he said he'd been saving a special bottle of champagne for us all, and he asked me to go down to the cellar to get it. And I was looking around, I just couldn't find it anywhere, and I really didn't want to disappoint him. So I kept looking, and then I kind of saw in the corner of the room an old box or something, and I thought, well, maybe it's in there. And when I moved everything off the box, I saw it was actually a brown leather trunk with the initials JC, which are my great-grandfather's initials, Jacques Cartier, Grandpa's father. And it looked like the trunk hadn't been opened for years, so I didn't really think the champagne was in it, but I thought, well, let's have a look. And inside were hundreds of letters. This is an example of some of the letters, diaries, telegrams, letters basically that spanned 150 years of my family, 4 generations, the setting up of a business, like how they survived in, not just a pandemic, but 2 world wars, a Great Depression, revolutions. Really this amazing family story.
You have a photograph of the first shop in Paris, the Cartier.
I do, but let's just go. There we are, 13 Rue de la Paix. Yeah.
And this too had a story.
Well, yeah, so this isn't actually the first shop. So Cartier, it's easy to think it's always been big, but like all businesses, it started off as a startup. The guy who started it was my great-great-great-grandfather. Very poor, no money to go to school. Apparently he loved learning, but wasn't allowed to go to school because he had to go out and earn money from a young age. Sent off to be a jeweler's apprentice. Ended up being really good at it, and when his master was retiring or selling his business, my great-great-great-grandfather, Louis-François Cartier, bought the business, borrowing money, taking out debt. It was a big risk. And he renamed it Cartier. But it was it was like a little workshop in the middle of the Marais in Paris. It wasn't, and they didn't even sell direct to customers at that stage. They sold to other shops who would then sell to customers. And then slowly he built it up, but it was still very small. For the next generation, it was still very small. And then his 3 grandsons were the ones who really took it onto an international stage. And Louis, the eldest, at the end of the 19th century, he was basically forced into a marriage. This is what I discovered in the letters. I'd read that it was a kind of happy marriage, but from the letters I realized that he was forced into this marriage. He really did not want to marry this girl. She's called André Caroline Worth. She was a few years younger. She was the daughter of Charles Frederick Worth, who was a great fashion designer of the day. He dressed everyone from Russian empresses to, the Queen of England, American heiresses. So he was super famous, very wealthy, and he had this granddaughter who couldn't marry into aristocracy because she was illegitimate. So anyway, the 2 families came to an agreement that she would marry Louis Cartier. Louis did not want this, and this is what the letters show, that his father was shaking him by the arm on literally the morning of the wedding, saying, "You will go ahead with this for the good of our business." And he was like, "Okay, I will, but I'll only do it for 10 years." Because every year for 10 years, they got a chunk of money. It was a bit kind of mercenary and strategic.
Reverse dowry.
Yeah. And anyway, so that marriage really enabled Cartier to kind of hit the big time, because not only did it give them the funds. So, by the way, the 3 brothers were brilliant. You'll see. They were brilliant, but unless you have money, it's hard to kind of do something with that brilliance. But it gave them the funds to move to a brilliant location. They really believed location was everything. Also, 13 Rue de la Paix was literally 2 doors down the road from Worth, the fashion house. And as I said, Worth was so world famous at this stage. Cartier was totally unknown at this stage, on the international stage. So when women went to Worth to buy their amazing designer dress, they were then directed by the Worth sales assistant saying, "Oh, you know what? This new tiara in Cartier would look brilliant with this dress." And so suddenly these very important women, came to visit Cartier. So it was not just the money, almost more importantly was the connections.
And, you talked about the brothers. when they were very young, they literally looked at a map and they divided up the world between themselves.
Yeah, Grandpa told me the story, and I wouldn't have really believed it, apart from the fact that Grandpa was the most honest man you'll ever meet, so he wouldn't have made anything up. But he said that his father and two uncles. So
her grandfather at that time was 9 years of age.
Yeah, these boys were when the boys were. The great grandfather was, yeah. So these boys were. So as I said, they'd grown up not wealthy. Their father had a small Parisian jewelry business, and they'd literally grown up above the shop. So they'd grown up very close. Their mother actually was committed to a mental asylum, so they'd grown up with their father, an ambitious father. They'd grown up ambitious, but very close, and they'd grown up with this dream to turn their family, or their grandfather's small jewelry shop, into the leading jewelry firm in the world. Quite a bold dream, but these three kids. And they said, how are we going to do this? Well, and it was a bit almost like a game of Risk or something. They took a map of the world and they were like, we're going to have to divide and conquer. They took a pencil and they divided the map between them. And Louis, he's in the middle, the eldest, he was very much the eldest and kind of in control, in charge, sorry. He said, I will take Paris, because Paris at this stage, is considered the center of the capital of the world, but certainly the capital of the fashion of the luxury world. Pierre, the middle brother, said, okay, well, I'll have America. He noticed a lot of wealthy clients coming over from America. And I don't think Jack had much say in the matter. He was given London. He said, well, they said, you can go to London. But with England, of course, came the British colonies. So it would be him who traveled to India.
And pretty quickly, once Jacques sort of arrived in London, he actually got an endorsement from the palace.
Yes. Well, I mean, they say that was part of the reason that they set up in London in the first place, is that Edward VII, as Prince of Wales, had been a visitor to Rue de la Paix. And when he was going to get married, when his mother died and when he was going to become king. The coronation in 1902. Apparently he asked Cartier to come and set up there because he wanted his clients to be able to buy their tiaras, in London. And they did make a lot of tiaras for that coronation. And then they got the royal warrant.
And then he sort of takes a suitcase and he comes to the coronation at the Delhi Darbar.
Exactly. So, should we move to that? There's a few things here, but we'll go here. Yes. So, in 1911, he sets off to India for the first time. And he's going out there because, India is a gem capital of the world. And of the three brothers, Jack is a real gem expert. So, it makes sense that he should go and look at the gems himself. But B, obviously the Indian clients, the Indian royal families, are could be some of the best clients in the world for Cartier. And so why go in 1911? Because the Delhi Darbar is a chance. They'll all be there. All the ruling princes will be in one place at one time. So it's a brilliant way to try and connect with all of them. And bear in mind, he doesn't know them at this stage. He has to get letters of introduction. So there's brilliant bits in the diaries where he's trying to kind of go and see get an introduction to a Maharaja, and he'll send a letter with a kind of sample of Cartier's wares. So he sends them the kind of fashionable pocket watch, which is really fashionable in Paris at the time. He's not giving it, but he's like, this is an example of what we create. Will you do me the honor of meeting with me? And some of them do, some of them don't. But he does find that one introduction then kind of leads to another. And for example, when he meets the Baroda royal family, then they invite him to come to their palace, which he then does.
But what was the unique selling point of Cartier? What sort of differentiated them from any of the other jewelers? And how did that come about? What was the setting that they did that really claimed everybody's attention?
Slightly go back. Okay, so I think the three brothers were brilliant, and Grandpa said they were so successful because they were so close, but also they were very different. The eldest brother was amazingly creative, like a Steve Jobs of his day, really coming up with amazing ideas. The middle brother was a brilliant businessman, and Jack, the youngest, was a bit of a mixture, but also the gem expert. So they had this motto, never copy, only create. And the idea was that they should take ideas and inspiration from everywhere, from all around themselves, but never from existing jewelry. So they should wander around Paris and look up at the architecture. They should look up at, the balconies, and they should be inspired by the balconies or for a shape of a tiara. They should look at furniture, garland style of furniture, and kind of use that to come up with ideas for jewelry rather than copying jewelers. So that was in terms of the Cartier style, creating their own style. But also Louis was creative in terms of materials. So he found gold and silver very heavy as mounts for jewels. They were the traditional mounts for diamond jewels at the time. And they were heavy, not only physically heavy, a tiara made of silver. You had to have quite a lot of the mount to hold the stone in place. And he wanted to find a mount that was much lighter and more easy to use and that stayed bright. He said the problem with silver, he thought silver looked better with diamonds than gold did for lots of these pieces. But the problem with silver is it oxidized so quickly. You're always having to clean it. So one day, this is what he explains in an interview to a journalist, he saw underneath the train carriage, I don't know what he was doing under a train carriage, but he saw a very bright, shiny metal. And he was like, wow, how can that still be so shiny, even, with all this dirt underneath the carriage? And he found out it was platinum. And platinum was not at all a precious metal. It was industrial metal. It was used in building projects, engineering. He then had to work out how to get some platinum, which wasn't easy because it was sold from the Urals in Russia in huge quantities for these engineering projects. But he managed to find a bit and experiment with it. And he ended up coming up with this platinum alloy. And that enabled him to create super light jewelry where the diamonds almost seem to float. This is a Devon de Corsage. You can't see the mount at all. You just see the diamonds, and that was revolutionary, and that really attracted the attention of kings, queens, people who love their big jewels. It showed them off to their best advantage, basically.
But it wasn't easy when they first went off to Russia. It wasn't that exactly they were being greeted with the red carpet. They had to fight off a lot of issues, including the jewelers in Russia who were used to be servicing the Tsars of that time and the Romanovs.
Yes, exactly. The Russians, this was something they faced in quite a lot of places they went. Obviously, the local jewelers did not really like this foreign French jeweler coming in and stealing their best clients. This is Pierre in Russia in 1904. He goes out there for the first time, and later Grand Duchess Vladimir, one of the most important Russians, certainly in terms of jewelry, in terms of hosting parties, in terms of kind of an influencer of the day, if you like. She liked Cartier very much, and Cartier was invited one year to display at her winter ball, or her winter fair, which kind of preceded the winter ball, and it was a big invitation. And Cartier went out with all these cases of jewels, very excited to display at this fair because it would be exposed to, the best clients in Russia, and the Russians were some of the wealthiest people in the world. This is obviously before the revolution. And then, there was a knock on Louis Cartier's hotel door, I think a couple of nights before the fair, and basically these policemen walked in, they seized all the little red boxes, they took him off to the police station, and they said, no, you can't, you haven't. And they kept coming up with excuse after excuse why, you haven't hallmarked them properly. And he's like, well, but most of my pieces are platinum. Platinum's not a precious metal, therefore you don't have to hallmark platinum. And they're like, well, no, but you've got 2 pieces of gold in here. And he's like, okay, well, we'll take out. Anyway, they come up with excuse after excuse. And eventually Grand Duchess Vladimir, gave a royal word, and he was allowed to display the jewels. And that really helped Cartier come up with some great clients in Russia.
And the equivalent of the Grand Duchess was actually your great-grandmother-in-law, Radhika. Tell us how that came about. And, when he travels to Baroda for the first time, and he meets your great-grandmother-in-law.
So, Sanjay, it is believed that they actually met in London, in the store in London, in Cartier. And Marni Chimnabai was so impressed by the jewels and the lightness and the design that she invited Jacques to come to India and time it with the 1911 Delhi Darbar. So our version is that they had met earlier and that she had said, why don't you come to India? I think it would lead to good collaborations. And when when he did visit Baroda, and I think there were more than one visits to Baroda, the intent was to redesign the royal jewels, the heirlooms, and there were a lot of, ideas that were exchanged, and I know there are beautiful sketches that were made of the old existing pieces, because there was no photography at home at that point, and there are beautiful sketches that when Francesca came to Baroda, she came with, and she said, it was a small sketch, and she said, yeah, she said, do you have anything like this? And I said, oh my God, we do, we have that piece. And that's how we put it together. And this is, of course, a very old sirpage of the family. And the intent was to redesign it. But at that point of time, there were several pieces of jewelry which were selected to be redesigned because they were either in gold or in silver. This particular piece is in silver because it is one of our oldest pieces. And at that point of time, all the jewelers of the state were up in arms. They were, of course, feeling insecure that this white person from outside is going to come and take away our work. But also they felt that the someone who is not from the, and has no understanding of the Hinduism symbolism of gems will not be able to give that kind of importance and emphasis to each stone, because caratage was important, the color, the cut, everything was important in terms of when you wear in Hinduism, as per, every gemstone has its, when it touches the skin, it's supposed to have its own many benefits. So that was their excuse. And Sayaji Rao then let it be for then. And the designing, or redesigning, resetting of these stones was not done. Of course, we know that there were other commissions that came on later on, and there was a long-term association, but the important pieces continued to be there as they were.
But Radhika, tell us, the royal families, whether it's Baroda or any other part of India, the jewelry or the jewels or the stones that you all receive, was it part of tributes? Was it commissioned by the families, or was it this thing of both? And like you said, much of it is also got to do with the nakshatra, which is, the planetary positions, and therefore what stone suits you. And the last part of this question is, what stone suits you?
All stones suit me. They just have to be large. I make sure.
But tell us a little bit about how, the jewels came into the family.
So, of course, when the Marathas were rising, it was simultaneous to the decline of the Mughals. And there was a hangover of that Mughal patronage, the understanding, the aesthetics were still very much influenced by the Mughals. And in India, Mughals had kind of reached the epitome of aesthetics and workmanship, craftsmanship. And so that kind of continued. And a lot of the artisans and craftspeople who had lost their patronage with the declining Mughal Empire found that so in the darbar or in the courts of the royal families like Baroda. And so a lot of the stones were also victories of war. So they were not just acquisitions in terms of what were purchased by, through jewelers and dealers, but a lot of them were spoils and victories from war. So there was also a projection of that very strongly, and that was always on the male monarch, because he was the one who was, there was parda. So women wore jewelry, but it was not something that was projected as emphatically as it was on the Maharaja, because he was the one who went visiting other empires. He was one who was sat for portraiture, for photography. So that brandishing of wealth was actually not wealth. It was valor, it was victory, it was
Power.
Stature, power, all of that. And in Baroda, you see there is a more proclivity and preference for pearls. So the Baroda pearls are famous even today. There was you would always see women dressed in pearls, and the Gaikwads have always had this association with Basra pearls, and we know that both the brothers Maharaja Khandirao and Malla Rao, they were major acquirers of precious stones and pearls, and they were bought from all over. At that point of time, the pearl prices in India were higher than what they would fetch in London, and that was because of royalty like Baroda that were acquiring them. And one of the craftsman pieces that we have is, of course, the Baroda pearl carpet.
We'll come to that in a second. Francesca, tell us a little bit about why was it that pearls became such a sort of, I mean, they came to their height at that point of time, and why was it that they were even more expensive than the diamonds or rubies of that period?
Yeah, I mean, pearls were by far the most valuable gemstone. They were 4 times the value of a diamond of the same size because they were so rare. You know, the diamond mines in South Africa had opened up the production of diamonds by now, but pearls were still so rare. And, you know, so Jack, part of his trip when he goes to India, he also stops at the Persian Gulf, and he's trying to kind of meet the pearl sheiks directly to try and buy from them directly rather than buying from multiple middlemen, because otherwise the pearls went from the Middle East to India, where they were all kind of to dealers in India.
Sorted and
sorted, and then they would come back to Europe. So there are multiple middlemen. So his brothers were like, right, go to Bahrain and try and buy them directly. So he does this, and he realizes just quite how hard it is. He says, a day on the whole, or a morning on the fishing boat, or the pearl fishing boat, and he watches a process, dangerous process. You know, the divers going down with basically clothes pegs as you know, to pin their noses, and they're weighed down. They put a bucket around their neck with stones in. They're literally weighed down to the seabed floor, scrummage around for the shells, put them in the bucket, and you know, pulled up again. Very dangerous. And he said after a morning on the boat, there are hundreds of shells, but not a single pearl of any value was found. He was like, wow, you know, how rare are they? So that's why. So it could take, you know, months to find a decent pearl, and then imagine how long it takes to build a whole necklace of pearls where every pearl has got to be matching size, color, tone, sheen. So it could take easily decades to make a necklace. And in fact, it was this stage, 1916, a bit later, but the Cartier had one of its most valuable pearl necklaces in the world in its New York branch. And it's that famous sale or swap where the necklace was valued at $1 million. Pierre Cartier was in New York at the time, running quite a small showroom. He wanted to move to a larger one. And basically the lady who wanted the pearl necklace, her husband was selling his house for $1 million. So Pierre Cartier and the gentleman did a swap, the necklace for the building. And Cartier moved into the building, totally renovated it, because it was just a residential house, renovated it. And that's still where Cartier, if any of you have been to Cartier Fifth Avenue in New York, that's still the same building that Pierre bought over 100 years ago for that single pearl necklace. So that just gives you an idea of the value of pearls. And of course, when cultured pearls exploded onto the market in the 1920s, the value of natural pearls plummeted. And Grandpa said actually that was worse for Cartier than 2 world wars, the Great Depression, because so much of Cartier's income was pearls. Because pearls were a way to show your power, to show your status, you know, because they were so valuable. The royals all had them, obviously, but in America, where there weren't any royals, there wasn't that aristocracy, the heiresses needed them. They needed, you know, there was almost a competition, you know, who had the longest strand of pearls. It was a way of showing your place in society. Yeah.
And in many ways, the Maharanis sort of really did that single strand of pearls, which Gayatri Devi then made very, very popular. Gayatri Devi was on the Time cover as the most beautiful woman, and with her husband, the most coveted sort of a couple of the year at one point of time, in a chiffon sari with a pearl necklace. And that really sort of showed where the pearls were. But coming back to Baroda for a second, have any of you been to Doha, to the Qatar National Museum? So if you all ever go there, or do make it a point when you're going out to stop off at Doha and go to the museum, because this is what you'll see. The pearl carpet, the Baroda pearl carpet, which is the only place you can view it. And tell us a little bit about the carpet, Radhika.
So this is the craftsmanship that existed in Baroda and in India. And it was, of course, as you can see, the motifs are very Persian. It was the influence of the Mughals. The patronage was very much carried on forward and continued from that era. And this was actually made to be put on the tomb of the Prophet in Mecca. And it is a suite.
As a chadar.
Yeah,
it was a chadar,
it was a
a
chadar.
covering.
And it was a suite of 5, and but it took so many years in the making that the Maharaja passed on before it could be completed. But it's a combination of precious stones. It's got gold. It's got uncut diamonds. It's got Basra pearls. It's on deer skin, and it's absolutely an exquisite masterpiece of jewelry.
And when they were asked to, in recent times, when 2 of the auction houses were asked to value it, they came back with, it's not possible to value this. It's invaluable. So this is one of the sort of detailed of this. Francesca, going back to Cartier and the pearl crisis arrived. As you said, they'd already gone through all of these, the Great Depression.
To come, but
The First World War
Yeah.
had happened. The Grand Duchess had escaped the revolution and had sort of moved on and brought with her her jewels. And many of these jewels then came to be acquired by American heiresses and billionaires.
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting. So my background before discovering that trunk of letters and writing this book, it wasn't actually in jewelry. I worked in finance. I kind of analysed companies for a living for many years in the city. And so I was kind of really interested when I was looking at the story of my family. I was looking at it from the human side. Obviously, these letters were very emotional and human, and love letters and love letters from father to son and so on. But I was also interested in it from a business angle, like how on earth did they survive all these things? Having analysed a company and thinking, gosh, is the share price going to go up or down given this downturn that we're expecting? How on earth did they keep going and keep growing through all that? And what I discovered, or what I found really interesting, was that the history of jewelry, if you follow the history of jewelry, or big important pieces, is it's a mirror to the history of the world, and you're basically following the power of the world, the power balances. So, for example, when Cartier started out, when the brothers came onto the scene in the early 20th century, I mentioned the Russians were the most important clients. The Tsar was the richest man in the world at that time. And so that's who, Cartier was selling a lot of jewels to the Russians. Then, of course, there was the Russian Revolution, and all these wealthy Russians had to escape. And there are terrible stories of them fleeing Russia, sewing the jewels into their costumes, even eating some of the jewels, just desperate to get out. And this was their portable insurance for the next life, basically. It had been a form of power. It's now turning into a form of insurance. So then they leave Russia. Some of them make it, some of them don't. Some of the jewels are seized by the Bolsheviks and then ended up being sold off. But anyway, some of them do leave with their jewels. For example, Grand Duchess Vladimir, who dies soon after. Her jewels are then passed to her kids. One kid gets all the emeralds, one gets all the rubies, one gets all the sapphires, one gets all the pearls. Anyway, so let's take the Romanov emeralds, which was one of the most important jewels in Russia at the time. She'd been given them on her wedding, and she had them in a phenomenal head ornament. And she flees, and she dies. Her son then sells them back to Cartier, because Cartier has built up this loyalty with the Russians, because they have, unlike many other jewelers in Paris at the time, who were very happy to stay in Paris, because Paris, as I mentioned, was the capital of the luxury world. So everyone came to Paris. The Indians came to Paris, the Russians came to Paris, the Americans came to Paris. They all came to Paris to buy their jewels, to buy their dresses from Worth. But Cartier was like, no, if we're going to really build relationships, we've got to go and meet them on their home ground. So as a result of that, they built up this great kind of loyalty with these clients. So the jewels are then sold back to Cartier, because they trust Cartier. And Cartier buys back, for example, these emeralds. And they're like, okay, well, it's now 1920s. Where's the money now? Well, the money is in New York, Jazz Age America. Let's sell them to an American. So what do we need to do? We need to make them into a very fashionable American, a very fashionable sautoir that American can wear, and the flapper dresses and so on. and sells them to a rich American. Then the Great Depression hits, and they're then sold back to Cartier again. And then what do you do with them? Then you have to kind of remake them into something. They make them actually into a very chunky necklace, and they sell to Barbara Hutton, who ends up in England. But then some of these end up in the 1930s. Who's got money? The Great Depression has made it very difficult for Western clients to buy big jewels, but the Maharajas haven't been affected by the Great Depression. So then you can sell to the Maharajas, and then later on, when my grandfather takes over after World War II, the money is then kind of in the Middle East. So then it's, the jewels are then sold back to Cartier, remade into something for the Middle Eastern clients. So really, you can follow literally the same gem, and it will tell you about what's happening in the world and where the power balance is shifting.
In many ways, it's environmentally fabulous, right? You're using
recycling.
It's upgrading the stuff. I mean, they were the first sustainable. But Francesca, you were talking about families. So Radhika, we know that families, when you open any of the million doors in your palace, there's at least a few skeletons still hanging around there. But as a family, you continue to support craft and art and reinvent yourselves. Tell us a little bit about that trajectory. I mean, look at what you're wearing. This is absolutely so exquisite and so Maharani-like and understated. And anybody wants to auction it, we'd be happy to.
So there always was an association and a close bond between the royal family and the artisans. Because one must remember that the most important patronage and commissions that came in the name of culture, craft, cuisine, was the temple and the crown. And it was world over, but specifically more emphasized in India. So the best craftsmanship you will see in temples and in palaces. And it still continues. So there was a very important...
Maybe we can just show a photograph of the palace. So this is the... Yeah, go ahead, Radhika.
And today these palaces are like little islands of what patronage and aesthetics were, say 100, 200 years back. They are like little time capsules. And most of us try our best to keep them alive as much as we can. It's tougher when it's a private residence of this size. There are 3 adults, 2 children, now 1 and 2 dogs residing in this. It's quite a challenge.
And obviously you don't do the cleaning.
Well, during lockdown, we did have to do that too. But, and anyway, the staff finds many rooms to hide in because they don't want to be assigned jobs, but that's another problem. But so that association with the artisans is for me, sometimes I find it easier to sit with the karigar on the floor and discuss textile or motifs than maybe with a businessman, because I don't have that background. But I can speak the language and understand what is the thinking and the life of an artisan. And that my life purpose has been, to a large extent, working and giving a platform to artisans and giving stability to craft in India. Because it's the second largest income generator, employment agency in India after farming, and it's declining. So most royal families did have that association. One must understand that there were large retinues of staff and extended family and karigars who were supported by royal families. And post-independence, you lost power, but you didn't lose the responsibility. So in our own ways, over generations, post-independence, most of us have tried to keep that culture and craft alive. So my work still continues.
And today you sit, in fact, on the trust of the of Asif, who's this incredible. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a trustee in the Craft Design Society. It's a trust based out of Ahmedabad, and my fellow trustees Vilu Mirza and Asif, and we work in aligning artisans with designers or people who understand aesthetics and can give the finish and silhouette to textile that would appeal to a larger audience. Because in India, there is no respect given to craft. And artisans are disconnected with what the demand of, say, someone living in Bombay has. And craft continues to be made very much in the way it was 100, 200, 300 years ago. So it becomes important to build a bridge between the craft creator and the consumer. And that bridge can be very well created by someone who understands the craft as well as understands the market trend or what people would find palatable to buy. And that's what CDS Art Foundation does. We align designers and artisans and give them a platform to showcase what they make. Because craft is yet not considered aspirational. The minute a designer label comes on it, it is aspirational. And Indian brides pay humongous amounts to be known as a bride of a label. But very often they don't know the hands that have created that garment. And when there was a time when a garment was named by the place it was known. It was known as a Banarsi or a Chanderi or a Maheshwari or a, Pochampalli. Now it's known by, say, a designer. And that takes away the entire provenance of a fabric or tradition heritage. So the effort is to do that.
We're going to try and bring Asif's work next year, or hopefully, or one of these years. It's the most exquisite work, and the only showing that ever happens is actually at their palace once a year, because he refuses to sell to just anybody who walks through the door. He's like, and who are you? And why do you want my stuff? And, he'll give you an interview and throw you out of the room. And, you can go off, but we'll try and get him here. Francesca, she was talking about artisans and how important it is. Cartiers understood that. And in fact, your great-grandfather, looking up at the balcony, saw this guy sort of designing this beautiful balcony and got him to join him after a couple of months.
Yeah, that's right. So famously, at the beginning, Cartier, or Louis Cartier and his brothers, they didn't want to hire, I said never copy, only create, so never copy existing jewelry. And that extended to not actually hiring jewelry designers. They're like, let's hire designers in other fields, So they hired people who were experts in ceramics or even garden design or architecture. And so actually Louis, one of the most important designers for Cartier, ended up being Louis' right-hand man, really, and the head designer, a guy called Charles Jacot. So Louis found him up a balcony. So one day, apparently, Louis was walking along the street. This story was told to me by Charles Jacot's daughter. When I met her, she's in her 90s. And so she still remembered this story of how her father had told her this, how her father had been so shocked. So Charles Jacot, being a young man, up a balcony, installing a balcony, up a ladder, basically, on the Rue de Rivoli in Paris. And Louis Cartier walks along and likes the look of that balcony. He says, wow, that's really beautiful, that's really unusual. Shouts up to the workman. He said, who was it who designed this balcony? And the workman said, oh, it's this guy here, because he was helping to install it, to check that it was all installed as he envisaged it. And Louis said, can you come down? Louis was kind of quite arrogant, quite used to kind of being listened to, I think. And so Charles Jacot eventually comes down, and Louis says, right, I'd like you to come in for an interview. And Charles Jacot is like, what are you talking about? I don't design jewelry. And he says, no, Louis says, no, please just come in and see me. And he said, well, I can't. I'm working on this contract. I've got another 6 months or whatever here. Louis said, that's fine. When you're ready, come into Cartier. And, 6 months later, he does turn up. And he's given his daughter said he was given some different coloured stones by Louis and asked to kind of do something with them. And he comes up with something. And Louis' like, yeah, perfect, you're hired. And he ends up being the most amazing designer for Cartier. Yeah.
And in fact, when he's given the stones, Louis said, sort of, go off, do your thing. And he says, no way.
Yes, exactly. So Louis leaves the stones with him and says, right, I'll leave you for an hour to come up with something. And he leaves the room. And Jacot's like, no, I don't want you to leave the room because I know what you're going to do. You're going to pretend that I've stolen the stones and you're going to try and put me... And Louis was like, no, I trust you. It's okay. He just wasn't expecting this guy to trust him like that. And it was amazing because he really brought something new to jewelry, really, helped create this Cartier style, which was so different to what... I mean, now you look back and you don't realize how, at the time, what they were doing was so bold. The fashion was for Art Nouveau flowing jewels. They came up with something very different. They came up with Art Deco jewels before the First World War, before it was even called Art Deco. They were coming up with these geometric shapes. They were putting these bold colors together in what's now known as the Tutti Frutti jewels, when it was, I mean, that was totally unheard of to mix ruby, sapphire, emeralds, at least in the West, like that. It was considered kind of rebellious, almost barbaric, I think Vogue called it at the time. And of course, you know, they've survived the test of time.
You know, you talked about trust. So this is a question to both of you. Is that sort of the underpinning of building a brand, trust?
I'll go quickly. I think one of the Cartier mottos, and this is something that the founder, I read in a letter from the founder to his son in the very early days, where they were really struggling and didn't think they would survive. There was a war going on in France, the siege of Paris. People were so starving in Paris they were forced to eat rats. It was the most terrible time to try and be running a jewelry business. So he sent his son over to London to try and sell jewels over there. He said, you know, the English aristocracy are unaffected by this siege of Paris. Go and sell our wares over there. And Alfred, his son, goes off to London. And lucky that he did, because as a result, we've actually got letters from that period between father and son, so we know what they were thinking. And the father says to the son, my one advice to you is be very kind. Whoever you meet, however high or low, be very kind, just like you are to us. It's quite moving. And I think that was so important. And the point was, Cartier was not known at the beginning, as I said. They were not selling big diamond tiaras. They weren't. They were a small jeweler. And the only way they could differentiate themselves was by treating everyone well. Obviously treating the clients well, but also their suppliers, you know, making sure they were paid always on time, giving them respect. And there are so many. There was a great story as well that Grandpa told me about his uncle Pierre, which summarizes this as well. So his uncle Pierre was in Paris, and it was a really rainy day in the early 20th century, and this American lady was outside, and she got caught in a terrible storm, and she ran into the closest shop, which was 13 Rue de la Paix, and she looked totally drenched, like she didn't look like she was about to spend a lot of money. And so the sales assistants basically ignored her. And Pierre noticed this from the corner of the room, and he was just furious because he'd been brought up by his grandfather and his father with this be very kind, treat everyone with respect, no matter who they are. Doesn't matter if she's not going to spend money here. You don't treat anyone like this. So he ran over to her and, you know, said, I'm, you know, very sorry, can I help you? And they ended up getting married. It was his wife. It's a very wealthy American heiress. Turned out to be a brilliant match. They did love each other, and she kind of opened doors to the American elite in America. But it just kind of summarizes that, just treat everyone very well.
Radhika, kindness and trust. Again, you know, royal families, the privy purse was, banned in 1975. You all have outlasted it, and you're still treated with a great deal of respect, and you still have some of your properties. There's only a handful of royal families today in India who still command that kind of respect. The secret, apart from your beauty?
Well, of course, that's no secret. No, jokes apart. I think it's about the continued regard and relation that the family has had with the people and for the people, that they've always served and looked out for the people. And that message has been very, very clearly understood by the subjects of this, you know, the erstwhile state of Baroda, and that regard and respect and love continues. You know, whether it's a naming ceremony of somebody in Baroda, we will still get an invite, an opening of a shop, or you know, there is that regard, the belief that these are people of that believe and support and have our best interests at heart, and that is basically the blessings and the good doings of our forefathers that we still reap. And we continue to be as conscious in that regard. So I suppose when you say trust of a brand, if you look at ourselves as a brand, it is because of that love and respect that has existed. And interestingly, in India, you know, when you talk about revolutions and things like that, India is the only place where we've had over 500 royal families. There's no incidence of an assassination or a coup or a bid. And I'm not saying that there were no rotten apples, there were many. But in spite of that, by and large, the royal families in India did have a very, very codependent relationship with their people. And that respect and regard in many ways continues. At least Baroda continues to repeat.
And like Francesca said, much of it was also about who did you marry, which family did you married into. What about the future? What's the legacy? Your daughters are listening to you?
Oh,
You've got your
very-
matches lined up?
Oh my. Actually, very interesting question, because I have only 2 daughters. And India is still very much, it's about a son. It's a patriarchal society. The dynasty is carried forward by a boy.
Except in Bhopal, which is...
Yes, because in the Muslim community, you don't have the adoption system. That is, yes, they've had, I think, 7 begums. But for most other royal families, it's a boy that inherits. So, yes, going to try and consciously break that with my 2 girls. I think some traditions need to be shaken up. So,
Francesca, we're coming to the end, and there's so much to unpack. But you know, flying into Hong Kong yesterday, I don't know whether they're there. I was traveling with colleagues of ours who had come for a festival we were doing in India day before yesterday, and they said to me, "Oh, the Cartier, you mean the watch people?" But the watches came much later. You know, the pocket watch, and then of course what we know, the great tank watch. Tell us that story.
If I can get quickly to a picture of a watch. Oh yeah, here we are. So so Cartier created one of the first wristwatches for men. So this is the tank watch. So what in the early 20th century, men wore pocket watches. When Jack first went to India, he'd gone taking all these amazing jewels, you know, the Devant de Corsage, type of things I showed you before, the Devant de Corsage, an amazing tiara. And he was super disappointed because he realized in India it was the men buying the jewels and they weren't really buying for the wives, they were buying for themselves. And he brought all the wrong things. And actually the piece they most wanted was the fashionable pocket watch that he'd, you know, the very super thin pocket watch they just made in Paris at the time. That's what was really considered like the most fashionable item for a man. And so that just shows you pocket watches are fashionable. It was women who wore wristwatches, and they wore diamond wristwatches of a silk strap, you know, not with a leather band. They were very feminine. They were bracelets. They were called montre bracelet, which means a watch bracelet. So Louis thought, you know, he had a strong idea that he thought men should be wearing wristwatches, and he was going to make wristwatches for men. And that's no easy feat. I mean, to change the whole way that a man thinks about this feminine accessory. And how did he do that? Well,
there was also an accident that sort of gave him that inspiration.
Yes, so the first wristwatch he made was called the Santos, and that was named after this aviator. And Santos Dumont was a very famous Brazilian aviator who lived in Paris. He was a friend of Louis Cartier. Louis loved kind of the idea of flying, of driving, all these kind of new machines, new at that time.
And they flew between restaurants, by the way.
And yeah, it was almost like a hot air balloon he had, and he did. And apparently, he would tie it to a lamppost as he kind of popped down for a glass of champagne. But he did have the odd accident, and he also he also liked partaking in races. This aviator, but apparently one time he was complaining to Louis that he couldn't check his pocket watch whilst flying because he had to have his hands on the steering wheel, of course. So the story goes that that's what gave Louis the idea to come up with the idea of having a wristwatch so he could check his watch whilst flying. And then the first watch they created was called the Santos. And then later during the First World War, they came up with the idea of the tank watch. And the shape here was said to have been inspired by the tank in the war. So this was in 1915. This is the first time most of the world had seen what a tank looks like. It was on the front page of L'Illustration, big French magazine at the time, and that was the first time people had seen what a tank was. Louis apparently was inspired by this idea to come up with the tank shape. So you can see the shape of the kind of the tire treads each side are like the sides of the watch, the brackets of the watch. And I said to Grandpa, I said, was it really inspired by the tank? And he said, it doesn't really matter if it was or it wasn't. The point was it was the most brilliant marketing, because how do you make a man think that a watch is masculine? You kind of compare it to the most masculine machine of war you can. And then, of course, over the years, it did become very popular, and it became popular for women as well. It's Jackie Kennedy wearing one. And I love this Andy Warhol here the right, he famously, when he was asked why he never wound his tank, he said, well, I don't wear a tank to tell the time. I wear a tank that's a watch to wear. And then it became kind of known as this iconic.
And they went on to create the mystery watch, which nobody could ever figure out.
Yeah, the mystery clocks were amazing. They've kind of been compared to Fabergé's eggs, and so rare and so beautifully made. They started. So the mystery of the mystery clock is that the dial is totally transparent. So people had no idea how it was working. It was almost, what did the press say at the time? They said it was seemingly woven from moonbeams. No one understood how it worked. And in fact, Louis was very strict that only the people who made the watch would know how it worked. Not anyone in the showroom was told. None of the salespeople were told, because they had to transmute their own sense of wonder directly to the client. And they were amazing. So this was the first one on the right, which was more simple, called the Model A. And then over time, they started experimenting with kind of using ancient figurines. These are more Asian-inspired. But they were beautiful and kind of very unusual.
I'm going to open it up for questions, so please keep yourself prepared. But so when the book came out finally, and a couple of years ago, what was the reaction, of the rest of your cousins and family, but more importantly, of Cartier itself, the suits who now own Cartier?
Well, I hope it's kind of offered a different perspective on the history, really, because I think Grandpa certainly felt that, there are a lot of beautiful coffee table books on Cartier, which are wonderful for showing the pieces, but they don't really dive into the history. And a lot of them had focused primarily on Louis Cartier as the elder brother, who I have spoken about today, who was brilliant, but it was a kind of, that was only part of the story. And so in telling this, in researching this story, which actually took me 10 years and all over the world, I actually tried to interview as many people as I could connected to the history, which ended up being hundreds of people. So I tried to track down from all the letters the names of the salespeople, the designers, the craftsmen, the clients, gem suppliers. I went to Sri Lanka, to sapphire mines. I literally went all over the world. And my poor kids, every one of their school holidays was a different research trip. But as a result, I spoke to so many people who had either worked for Cartier, very elderly people, or their descendants who remember stories of their mother or their father or their grandfather. And they all told me about, for them, Cartier, or for their ancestors, Cartier felt like a family. They had they didn't earn a fortune, but they had such a respect and pride for where they worked. And, it was a lifelong career. And as a result, they were so welcoming to me and opened up their homes. And I feel like I've now got this huge extended family. It's a funny thing, family, isn't it? I feel like I've got this huge extended family, which aren't all my blood family, but have accepted me totally unconditionally because of that history of our ancestors. But in terms of my family as well, yes, I've kind of, as a result of writing this, I've met more distant cousins all over the world because, as the generations pass, obviously your family gets bigger and bigger and you don't necessarily know all of them, which has been wonderful. And yes, I've had so many wonderful messages from people within the firm today saying it's helped them see the history, felt them feel more connected to the brand, the sense of family.
The original book is actually a coffee table book with the most beautiful photographs of the jewelry. And
there are still the same photographs are in the paperback.
And this particular version, and there's a Chinese version that I saw out there. So this version is available, and Francesca will be happy to sign it. Radhika, last question for you. So, books really are records of history and of families and of tragedies and of celebrations. And I know there's a number of architectural coffee table books on the palace and the beautiful marble and the statuary. Have you thought of actually doing a lot of the research and doing a new version or an upgraded version of this, of the history of the Gaikwads? The Gaikwads were actually conquering generals who came with the Maratha armies and then stayed back because each of them were given a particular area to govern.
Well, there are many books that need to come out on Baroda, and I remember when I went for JLF last in Maldives, and I was perhaps one of the only ones who was not an author there. And my daughters had so much fun. They said, Mama, when are you writing a book? We need to be coming here every year. So I know there is this great desire inside me also to write. There is a lot of research that is on. There are many, many stories that need to be told, and sometimes it is confusing which one needs to be told first. But I need to focus on getting at least one out soon.
Focus on a new book. Ladies and gentlemen, questions? Do we have mics right up in front?
Francesca, Radhika, thank you so much. It's been really amazing listening to the stories. I wanted to ask you, in your journey, Francesca, and as you've gone round the world, what has been the most inspirational piece of jewellery that people talk about that Cartier created?
Oh, I don't think
The rubies.
I don't think you can have one, because I think people have different connections to different pieces. You know, like Sandra said, my book just came out in Chinese, and I've giving talks next week in China about the more kind of Asian-inspired pieces, and you know, for jade and things like that are so important, have such meaning. And then there were this Egyptian revival pieces where Jack, my great-grandfather, would go to Egypt and he would go to the markets and he'd buy these beautiful antiques, and he would, you know, he might use a little antique faience and slightly adapt it with a few diamonds and use it as a brooch, and it'd be totally unique, and that would obviously appeal to. And then when I went to the Middle East, my book came out in Arabic, and I actually tried the pearl diving myself, and I did the whole scuba diving and looking around for pearls, which was amazing. And I also met the descendants of everyone, the four kind of pearl sheiks that Jack had met in the Persian Gulf 100 years earlier, which was really moving. And their families are still, you know, many of their families are still in the pearl trade. So for them, obviously, it's the pearl necklaces. And so I don't think, you know, and obviously Maharajas in India, they're most, I mean, that's the ultimate kind of extravagant, some of them. I mean, the Patiala necklace, which was 3,000 diamonds or something phenomenal. So it depends. But then, you know, you could make, the Cartier made someone just a very small little tie pin, but it would have been made with the birthstones of their husband or wife, and for them, that's the most important piece. So it's a very, jewelry is a funny thing, because it can be like a symbol of power, it can be that insurance, it can be an act of love. So it's kind of, it can be very emotional and specific, I think, yeah.
Just wait for the mic.
Absolutely super talk. So going back to the history, the craft, fantastic. So my question, Francesca, is to you. Pretty much every woman today has a Cartier love bangle. I mean, 25 years ago, I remember it was so aspirational. And today, it's very hard to go to London, Paris, New York, Bombay, and not see a woman having the love bangle. Can you tell us a little story about how your forefathers thought to lock it and then to have a little, you know, the key and to lock up the love? Because I love the love bangle.
Yeah, well, that was actually, so my book will talk about the kind of the journey of Cartier, and also, so that was in Cartier, New York, after actually my grandfather's cousin had sold Cartier in New York. So it was, the different branches were sold out of the family at different times, and that was Chipullo, obviously the designer who designed that. But the idea, it was just a brilliant marketing move. The idea was, yeah, exactly, you lock up the love, and I think they gave it to very famous couples at the time, which really helped boost. I mean, so much of it is about kind of selling a dream, isn't it? Help boost that. And then there were kind of lots of stories in the press about how it was a problem in airport security and people couldn't get it off and they couldn't go through. And it was all good publicity. But you're right, it's had a kind of big revival again recently.
But it sort of also emerged from the interlocking bracelet design.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the kind of the origin for it. But I think these things like the Trinity ring, like the tank watch, some of them just become, for whatever reason, some rather than others become iconic. And yeah.
Okay, so last question before we wrap up. The curse of the stone. You have some wonderful stories about how stones are cursed, and you talk about one particular family.
Yeah, so there was, well, there are a few cursed stones, but there's the Hope diamond, which was a large blue, very expensive, supposedly cursed diamond. And this was interesting because this was another way of Pierre Cartier, the middle brother, was a brilliant businessman, and this is an example of how he was a great businessman. So he was trying to build Cartier's reputation in New York, and Cartier, when he moved to New York, was unknown. When he married his wife, Elma, the one who he'd met dripping wet, the New York Times reported, "Heiress to wed foreigner." And it had this big article all about Elma and no mention of the fact that Pierre was a jeweler or Cartier. I mean, they were totally unknown in America. So Pierre came to America to set up and had to build this reputation from nothing. And how do you do that? Well, you buy a famous stone. Because the Cartiers believed that you shouldn't advertise. At this stage, they didn't want to advertise at all. They wanted to they thought if we want to attract the kings and queens don't want to open a newspaper and see their jeweler there. They want something more exclusive than that. So how do you advertise? It's only word of mouth, really. So how do you get people talking? You buy a famous stone. They bought this cursed diamond, Pierre did, because he thought he had the perfect client in mind for it. Evelyn Walsh McLean. She was very wealthy, and she just married a very wealthy man. They were really the kind of very early influencers of the day. They were always written about in the gossip columns, had big parties, traveled all over the world. So he bought this stone, and he knew that she liked big, important pieces, and he thought that she wouldn't be put off by the curse. She would kind of probably rather like it. It'd be a bit of a story. He showed it to her, and she wasn't really that interested, and he was very disappointed because, you know, as a jeweler, you spend a lot of money up front to buy this stone. They didn't have a lot of money in those days. It was still early days. And he was like, gosh, so what am I going to do? So then he reset the diamond in a different setting, in a necklace setting, and a few months later, he showed it to her again, and this time she was like, maybe. And he was clever, Pierre, because he understood people, and he knew that Evelyn, because she was being quite wealthy, maybe a bit spoilt, was used to receiving things and not used to giving them back. So he said, why don't you just borrow it overnight and see what you think about it in the morning? And she writes in her memoirs, which are brilliant, she said, all night long that thing just winked at me, and by morning I knew I had to have it. So she kind of writes to Pierre and says, right, no, I'm going to keep it. He's like, great. And then she doesn't pay, as is the case often with some of the big clients in Cartier, or, you know, taking ages to pay. And he really needs this money, right? He's this big cash outflow to buy this stone. And they have to start the legal process to get her to pay. Anyway, and then she was like, oh, God, if I'm going to have to pay, I'll have to take it to, I'll take it to the church to be blessed before I pay, because I want to be sure that it's okay. So apparently she goes to meet the priest in the church, and they place it on this red velvet cushion. She writes all this in her memoirs. It's an amazing story. I quote it in my book. And she said, just as the priest was blessing it, thunder shook the church. And for some reason, she takes that as a sign that everything is going to be totally all right. So she was like, fine, I'll take it. She pays him. She does have quite a lot of bad luck in her life, actually. But anyway, she never believes in the curse. She wears it a lot. And in fact, her and the Cartiers become good friends. Cartier doesn't make any money from that sale at all. In fact, I think they lose some because of the legal fees and everything else. But it is the most brilliant marketing, because she wears this at all the parties. She puts it around the neck of her dog. She plays games where she hides it in the garden, and it's called Hide the Hope, and the guests have to go in with their champagne and find the Hope diamond in the flower bed. And so it's written about in all the papers all the time. And whenever it's written about, it's like, Evelyn McLean with her Hope diamond from Cartier, and suddenly Cartier's in the press. And that kind of helps.
Of course, she, in the meanwhile, loses her husband, her son, and maybe that's the reason why she bought the diamond, we don't know, and her daughter.
But she doesn't lose hope.
She doesn't lose hope. Radhika, last question to you. In India, a lot of jewelry or stones, etc., are actually dedicated to the gods or the Devtas or the family gods in your homes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a lot of the prominent pieces were for the gods, and they were according to nakshatra, that the stone should touch the skin, which stone should touch, which should not, and so but it was always set in gold, and that would be the difference. The jewelry that the royalty would wear, as compared to what gods would wear, you would see the setting would be entirely in gold. Heavier, there'd be more traditional motifs, bells, there would be embossing of different symbolism. So that was, you can immediately tell the jewelry of the god as compared to jewelry of the royalty. And in families like us, one did not wear only gold. So it was important to have stones in your jewelry. If you wore just plain gold, it would mean that it is either, very, very ornate, would be for the god, or if it is simpler, then it was for the staff. But royalty would never just wear plain gold. So there was distinctions in jewelry. In that sense.
And just for everybody, where do you hold all of your jewels today?
Do you think it's safe for me to divulge that?
Ladies and gentlemen, Radhika Raje Gaikwad, Francesca Cartier. Francesca will be happy to sign her books after this.
Thank you, Sanjoy. Thank you, Radhika. Thank you, Francesca. The audience is going to indulge me a little bit because I want to tell them about India by the Bay and what's going to follow in the rest of the days. India is culturally rich. We have many diverse stands, and India by the Bay tries to weave them together. This year, we've got 63 artists that are involved in the festival. Post-COVID, this is the first time we're on ground after 3 years. And if you can imagine the excitement that we are feeling to bring all this to you. So following on from today, we've got a day full of wellness. And that doesn't just mean the postural yoga, which we have, but we've also got a panel discussion with Ayurveda coming in from India. We've got Chayavad poetry, which is Kabir's poems and other things coming up that day. So do check that out. We also have Romy in the room. He's here somewhere. And he's going to be talking about his antique collection of Kashmir shawls as well as European shawls. So if you're interested in all things beautiful, Romy is going to be sharing his story with you as a collector and what that means. In music, we've got Shubhendra Rao and his wife, Saskia, who plays the cello. We've also got 2 artists from Hong Kong who are coming in as a collaboration. So we've got Belle Shui on the pipa player, as well as Tijo Man, who's a jazz guitarist. So as you can see, it's diverse, and we truly, truly mean it. We also have a literature event, which is called Making India Great, Grasping Greatness. We've got Bollywood Spotlight. That's something which, when people think of India, they think of Bollywood. And we cannot leave that out as part of this endeavor to bring the best of India to you. So we've got Masaba and Neena Gupta, a mother and daughter duo. It's going to be a fascinating sharing of stories with you on that evening. And a dance drama, last but not the least. I'm not going to mention the gala dinner because that's sold out. But we have Chef Piku gala dinner, which comes in. But before that, we've got Bollywood Love Story, a fabulous musical. Half the people who are coming in, half the artists that I mentioned, 64, half of them are actually coming in to perform for this particular Bollywood Love Story musical for you. So do check it out. Tickets are easy to get. You can either buy them on the Asia Society website or at Pop Tickets. Thank you so much for coming in today. Enjoy the rest of today, and we hope to see you through the festival. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that Professor Dr. Ram Kumar, the Ayurvedic expert who's coming tomorrow, runs this fabulous clinic in Kerala and near Coimbatore. And he's quite a rare person to catch. So anybody wants some advice on their state of their health, do come to tomorrow's Ram Kumar session. And lovers of music, Saskia has created a new cello to match with Shubhendra's sitar, which they've developed as a collective sound. So that's a special concert. So thank you all, and Francesca will sign books.